Time is ticking down to the deadline for a new collective bargaining agreement to be finalized between the CFL and Players Association. The current CBA ends Saturday, May 14th at midnight. And without a new one, there would be a delay in training camps opening on Sunday. Can the two sides beat the clock?
I think they will. And at the end of the day, there have been some, I suppose, minor positive developments. For instance, the PA did instruct players not to necessarily travel for training camps. As I understand it, many players were already in their CFL cities, but the teams have at least committed to housing and feeding players, provided that a legal strike is taking place. So it's not like players are going to be, completely without anywhere to go in the event that we do reach the start of training camp without a deal. At the end of the day, the best way to get a deal done is necessity. And we are reaching the 11th hour. I always suspected it was going to come down to the 11th hour. I know Randy Ambrosie likes to speak with that flowery language about how positive and energized and excited everybody is about CBA negotiations, and everything is positive and hunky-dory, and we're all holding hands singing Kumbaya. But at the end of the day, when you talk money, it's always going to get contentious. The league, right? The teams feel like they've made a sacrifice over the last couple of years with this pandemic. The players feel like they've made a sacrifice. The good news is neither side can afford a delay to the start of the season. So I think we'll get it done. We're just further away at this point than I think fans were hoping for.
We certainly are. And I do think we'll get this done. Like we've said before on this podcast, that deadline is not necessarily a bad thing. Both sides want to push it sometimes, so they get that pressure. What I worry about is some of the damage that this negotiations might have caused, because I do think that there is some genuine progress in direction towards a partnership prior to this between the players in the league. There was some new transparency. There was some hope on that front. But it seems like the league has taken a fairly hard-line approach here with the players, really try to gut some things out in this new CBA, and whether they genuinely want those things or not, whether it's a negotiation tactic to try and meet somewhere in the middle, I don't think it matters, because any goodwill that they've managed to slowly claw back over the last little while is completely gone. And I just don't think that for the long term is a good negotiating tactic.
The fact that the two sides were able to agree on amendments to the CBA to get on the field after the 2020 CFL season was canceled should be a positive, but we know that deals never come until deadlines happen, especially in the CFL. And overall, it really shows to me how the CFL feels about its players when they put an offer on a table that includes a 10-year flat salary cap. No way for it to go up over 10 years. And here's Randy Ambrosie out here talking again about wanting to be partners with the players, when in actuality, behind the scenes, what's going on is what's gone on for years in the CFL. The league bullying the players into taking a deal that is not fair for them. Now, this time around, I think it's actually different. We have not seen, at least in my time covering the CFL, the PA come out and direct veteran quarterbacks not to go to rookie camps, for example, or direct players not to go to training camps. Now, players can do that on their own, as Hodge alluded to earlier. There are a bunch of players that are in town already at camp. But the key aspect for me, though, is the veteran QBs not being on the field at rookie mini camps. Usually they would be there getting reps in, just getting a feel for being back on the CFL field and in the pro atmosphere once again. And you have Solomon Elimimian leading the PA as the president, who's a guy that was a hard-nosed player as a linebacker. Obviously, we know what he's done on the field, and he's going to do the same at the negotiating table to get the best for the players along with the other executive. And I think because the executive is made up of a mix of American and Canadians, that it could potentially be a better deal. And from my perspective, I understand that the league wants to put out things like a flat cap for 10 years as a starting point in negotiations to meet somewhere in the middle. But when you're talking about getting rid of the entire ratio and you want to meet in the middle on that, that means that even though the league put out a statement, they're really not holding up to their words, because that could potentially mean a loss of a good amount of Canadian jobs, even if they meet somewhere there in the middle. So I think the PA at this point in time needs to push it. What does it matter, especially if you're a veteran player, that you miss a few days of training camp? Yes, people on the outside and the fans might not like it, but if I'm the players, I'm sitting there saying, hey, we're going to be willing to push it to the limit, miss some training camp time in order to get a better deal for all of us.
Well, and training camp sucks if you're a player, so there's also that to factor in. And I'll also say this. I mean, again, the league can say what it wants, but at the end of the day, if you as a professional are in a situation where your employer genuinely cares about you as a person, then you are in a position of privilege, because by and large, employers around the world, and professional sports are no different, would be perfectly happy paying you in peanuts, or paying you in Domino's coupons or Walmart bucks. They generally are only concerned about their bottom line, and the people who run the CFL are no different, right? Ask Jonathan Hefney how much these teams actually care about these players. So, yeah, I know Randy Ambrosi has said repeatedly, and other league officials have said how much they care about the players. Well, the proof is in the pudding, and the offer that was made from the league to the players was a joke. Yes, it is a negotiation, but at the end of the day, if I'm a player, I have absolutely no reason to believe why anybody affiliated with the league would care about me as a person. At the end of the day, every player is replaceable. Coaching staffs and scouts make their living trying to replace veteran players who cost them extra money. So I fully understand from the player side of things why they're approaching this with a heavy level of skepticism, because frankly, it's the right thing to do.
To me, there's a difference between that lowball offer, which I think everyone expects it to be a lowball first offer, and an insult. And to me, this was insulting what was put forward after all this talk and all this kumbaya, to say that 10 years without a raise in the salary cap, after you've talked all off season about what legal gambling is going to do to CFL revenues and what Genius Sports, what this partnership can potentially do, to say that all these wonderful things are on the horizon financially for the CFL, and then say, but we're not going to raise the salary cap. You're not going to see any of that money for 10 years. This is an absolutely ridiculous opening offer before you even get into the ratio stuff, which is entirely problematic in its own way in another regard, right? I just don't understand the logic behind it to go that hard line that quickly from the league's perspective. And they've completely misevaluated, in my mind, where the players are standing right now, because we can talk about the hardships they've faced over the pandemic, and all that is true. But what they've realized over that time is, hey, I don't need to make $70,000 Canadian to play football and smash my brain in. I don't. There are other jobs. I had to get one last year when we weren't playing football. I know that there are other opportunities. I'm doing this because I enjoy it, because I like it, because I love it. Okay. And so the league thought they were weak because they missed out on all those paychecks, but it's really made them stronger because they've realized there's a whole world out there. And I don't think the union has ever been in a better position from top to bottom in terms of people being galvanized and being willing to go on a work stoppage, because they realize this isn't the only option in their life.
The critical aspect of where the negotiations are at right now, and that was all very well said, JC, and I agree with all of it, is the fact that you offered them a 10-year deal with no potential for the salary cap to go up, which means less money in the players' pockets if the league brings in new revenue like they're hoping to with Genius Sports, and heaven forbid the global program actually brings in some revenue to disperse to the players. Maybe there's a new contract signed in there with TSN or otherwise. I know some people, fans specifically, would like to see it split up, but the fact that that lowball offer was presented to begin with is going to be very difficult for the league to come back from. Yes, it's a negotiation, but you got to start somewhere that's fair, especially if you're preaching about making the players partners. So how are you going to come back to the table and present a new offer to the players, which the league did on Wednesday morning at a downtown hotel in Toronto, or I should say an airport hotel in Toronto, and actually come back from that? Because there was a lot of hostility and frustration. You saw it on social media. A lot of big name players changed their Twitter profile pictures to the CFLPA logo and tweeted out the CFLPA logo. We saw the NHLPA tweet out a note standing in solidarity with the CFLPA. So I think exactly what JC said, the fact that these players went through 2020 where they didn't have a CFL season and they still survived, somehow they figured it out, means that they're stronger than ever, and that the CFL needs to come back to the bargaining table and actually show, instead of talking about it, that they mean business in terms of a partnership with the players. That's going to be critical here if we're actually going to get a deal done by essentially Sunday.
Yeah, and at the end, and we should move on here, boys. But the other thing I'll say is I appreciate, yeah, a low ball offer, all this and that. But at the end of the day, coming out of this pandemic, again, the messaging all off season and the narrative that, one could argue we've perpetuated on 3 down, but I think at the end of the day, it's accurate to what the news cycle has been. It's, oh, the players aren't good enough. The rules suck. We need to change this. We need to change that. We need to go to 4 downs. And now we're at another ugly labor battle. We just did this 3 years ago. We've had 2 seasons between then and now. Like, this needs to get done. It needs to get done very quickly, because I've seen a ton of tweets and posts from CFL fans who are at their wits' end, being like, if it's not one thing with this league, it's the next. And every step of the way is ugly. Every step of the way takes away from what's going on in the field. And frankly, that's hurting the CFL's brand. And I don't think there's any argument against that.
There's always going to be something, and it should be noted that the MLB's recent labor negotiations got fairly contentious, and there was a thought that they could miss regular season games, but that's how far the players were willing to push it. And ultimately, a fair deal was agreed upon, one that the players felt like could actually they could see be put together, and that actually got papered and signed, and they're on the field playing baseball, of course. So I understand from the fans' perspective that they feel like this is damaging to the sport, but you have to have a fair deal. And I think there's probably some people out there that feel like 3 down or some of the reporting that we've done is tilted towards the players, but we're just telling it like it is. We have the memos up on the site, and we're also looking at it from the CFL side, right? The owners have gone through a year where they missed in 2020, no revenue coming into their pockets. And yes, you could argue that some of them are multi-millionaires and have millions of dollars in their bank accounts in their pockets, but that doesn't necessarily just mean they want to keep pumping it into the league. So we need to give some credit there that the league is still going after the pandemic, after a year away from the field. But it is time for the Board of Governors to finally treat the players fairly. Like, we're talking about revenues and all the major North American sports being split in and around that 50% mark, and the CFL and its players are well below that in past agreements. So that has to change. True partnership means equal. Like, if you're in a relationship, it should be 50-50. So that's what the players are looking for, or at least something close to it, and the league coming a little bit over the line potentially to some of the things that the players want in terms of guaranteed money. That could be a key aspect. We're seeing it in the NFL all the time now. Guaranteed contracts for guys like Deshaun Watson, who has some issues, I guess, let's say, to deal with off the field, getting $230 million. Now, the money is never going to be that much in the CFL. But the fact that he got that much money guaranteed is the critical factor. You see the first round picks getting fully guaranteed contracts in the NFL. Meanwhile, in the CFL, the contracts for first round picks have actually gone down and you get locked in. Part of the reason for that was because people didn't want to have negotiations like Josiah St. John a few years ago, where he held out, and it's happened with other players in the past. But still, they've taken players' money out of their pockets in some regards and haven't guaranteed it. So those are some of the fundamental issues. And of course, it always comes down to money. And to be frank, there needs to be more in the players' pockets, especially in the CFL, where the average salary, when you take out the quarterbacks, is under $100,000.